The morning sun cast golden reflections across the port of Savannah as Sarah Collins adjusted the tactical vest hidden beneath her loose linen blazer. The weight felt reassuring, familiar, a reminder that beneath the carefully constructed facade of a dog trainer consultant, she remained what she'd always been, a cop. "Easy, Max," she murmured, her fingers brushing through the thick fur at the base of his neck. The Belgian Malinois sat perfectly still beside her, his dark eyes scanning the crowded terminal with the same analytical precision she employed. To anyone watching, they appeared to be just another passenger and service animal preparing to board. But Max's harness told a different story to those who knew what to look for. The reinforced tactical webbing, the nearly invisible camera mount, the emergency beacon disguised as an ID tag. Special Agent Marcus Chen from the FBI's Atlanta field office approached with 2 boarding passes and a manila folder. His expression remained neutral, professional, but Sarah caught the tension in his jaw. This operation had taken 6 months to set up, and they both knew the stakes. "Officer Collins," he said formally, handing her the documents. "Your credentials as Jennifer Morrison, Certified Service Dog Trainer. You're consulting for Ocean's Pride's new accessibility program. Max is registered as a therapy dog in training." Sarah took the folder without breaking character, smiling warmly as if receiving simple travel documents. "Thank you. I'm excited to assess their facilities." "The target vessel departs in 40 minutes, Chen continued, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "We've identified at least 12 suspected operatives aboard, 6 crew members, 6 posing as passengers. The ship's manifest shows 238 guests total. Your primary objective is intelligence gathering. Map the operation, identify the leadership, document the evidence. The takedown happens when you dock in Charleston in 5 days. Understood, Collins." Chen's dark eyes met hers. "These people are professionals. International trafficking networks don't operate on luxury cruise ships without serious resources and serious consequences for anyone who gets in their way. If your cover is blown—" "It won't be," Sarah interrupted quietly. She'd run undercover operations before, though never quite like this. The confined space of a cruise ship presented unique challenges. No backup nearby, no quick extraction, nowhere to run if things went sideways. Chen glanced down at Max, who remained motionless except for the subtle movement of his ears, tracking every sound in the busy terminal. "He's ready?" "Max has water rescue certification, shipboard training, and detection specialization in narcotics, explosives, and firearms. He's been my partner for 6 years. Sarah's voice carried absolute certainty. "We're ready." The agent nodded slowly, then handed her a small silver device disguised as a thumb drive. "Encrypted satellite uplink. Use it to transmit any intelligence you gather. It's hidden in plain sight, looks like a regular USB stick. And Collins, watch your 6 out there." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood on the gangway, leading to the Ocean's Pride, her carry-on bag slung over one shoulder, Max walking calmly at her left side. The cruise ship towered above them, 12 decks of gleaming white hull and tinted windows, its name emblazoned in elegant script along the bow. Music drifted from the upper decks, where early boarding passengers had already begun celebrating their vacation. A young crew member in a crisp white uniform checked her boarding pass. "Ms. Morrison, welcome aboard. You're in cabin B47 on the coral deck. Will you need any special accommodations for your service dog?" "Max is very well trained," Sarah replied with a practiced smile. "But I'd appreciate information about the ship's accessibility features. That's actually why I'm here. I'm conducting an assessment for the company's new program." "Of course. Our guest services manager will contact you this afternoon to schedule a tour." The crew member's smile seemed genuine enough, but Sarah noticed how his eyes lingered on Max, just a fraction too long, a flicker of something, curiosity, concern, crossing his features before the professional mask returned. They boarded. The interior of the Ocean's Pride gleamed with calculated luxury, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, rich mahogany paneling. Passengers milled about the grand atrium, champagne glasses in hand, cameras out, voices echoing with excitement. Sarah moved through them smoothly, unremarkable, just another traveller finding her way. Cabin B47 was compact but well-appointed, with a queen bed, small sitting area, and a porthole offering a view of the dock. Sarah locked the door behind her, then swept the room methodically. She checked for cameras, bugs, anything that might compromise her real purpose here. Max circled the space, his nose working but showed no alert signs. "Clear," she said softly, and Max immediately relaxed, hopping onto the small couch and watching her with attentive brown eyes. Sarah unpacked quickly, setting up her laptop and connecting the encrypted uplink device. A secure connection established within seconds, and she typed a brief message, "On board, beginning reconnaissance." The reply came immediately, "Copy that. Stay safe." She changed into more casual attire, dark jeans, a fitted black t-shirt, comfortable walking shoes, and clipped Max's leash to his harness. Time to explore. The Ocean's Pride was a labyrinth of corridors, stairwells, and public spaces. Sarah made mental notes as they walked: security camera positions, crew-only access points, emergency exits, the layout of each deck. She maintained her cover, stopping occasionally to take photos with her phone, as if documenting accessibility features while actually mapping the ship's infrastructure. Max drew attention, as expected. Passengers stopped to admire him, ask questions about his training, request photos. Sarah handled each interaction with friendly professionalism, using the conversations to gather information about who was aboard and what they'd observed. On the promenade deck, she paused at the railing, ostensibly to let Max enjoy the sea breeze as the ship began pulling away from port. In reality, she was observing a group of men gathered near the aft section, their body language too rigid, too watchful. 3 of them matched descriptions from the FBI briefing, suspected members of a Colombian cartel operating out of Miami. One of them noticed her watching. Sarah immediately shifted her attention to Max, running her hand along his back and speaking to him in an animated voice about the ocean. When she glanced back, the men had dispersed. Too close, she thought. Stay casual. The afternoon passed in careful observation. Sarah attended the mandatory safety drill, noting which passengers paid attention and which ones already seemed familiar with the ship's layout. She ate lunch in the main dining room, eavesdropping on conversations at nearby tables. She walked the outer decks multiple times, committing every detail to memory. Max performed his role perfectly, behaving like the therapy dog he was supposed to be. Calm, friendly, approachable. But Sarah knew he was working just as hard as she was, his acute senses gathering information she couldn't access. The subtle tension in his posture near certain crew members, the way his ears swiveled to track specific conversations, the slight nostril flare when they passed the cargo bay access, all signals she'd learned to read over their years together. At 4 o'clock, her cabin phone rang. "Ms. Morrison, this is Robert Torres, Guest Services Manager. I understand you're here to assess our accessibility program?" "That's correct," Sarah replied. "I'd love to schedule a comprehensive tour of your facilities." "Wonderful. Would 6 o'clock this evening work? I can show you our accessible cabins, public spaces, and safety features. It should take about 90 minutes. "Perfect. I'll meet you in the main atrium." After hanging up, Sarah studied the crew manifest Chen had provided. Robert Torres wasn't on the suspected list, which meant he was either clean or very good at staying under the radar. She'd need to stay alert during the tour, use it to access areas normally restricted to passengers. She spent the next hour reviewing the intelligence files on her laptop, memorizing faces and known associates. The operation they were tracking had tentacles reaching across 3 continents, drugs moving north from Colombia, weapons moving south from the United States, money laundering through a complex network of shell companies. The Ocean's Pride had been flagged 6 months ago when a DEA informant mentioned high-level meetings taking place on the floating palace. Max's sudden low growl pulled her from the screen. Sarah's hand immediately moved to the concealed weapon at her back, her body tensing. Max stood facing the door, his hackles slightly raised, every muscle coiled. Someone was in the corridor outside, listening. She could see the shadow beneath the door, motionless. Sarah moved silently to the side, positioning herself at an angle that would give her the advantage if the door opened. Her finger rested on the gun's grip, adrenaline sharpening her senses. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The shadow shifted, then disappeared. Sarah waited another full minute before approaching the door. She checked the peephole. The corridor appeared empty. She cracked the door open. Max immediately pushing past her to check the hallway, his nose working furiously. Nothing, but someone had been there, someone interested in cabin B47. "Good boy," she whispered to Max, closing and relocking the door. Her cover might already be compromised, or it might have been routine security checking on the new passenger with a dog. Either way, she'd need to be more careful. At 6 o'clock sharp, Sarah met Robert Torres in the atrium. He was a slim man in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a professional demeanor that seemed genuine. His handshake was firm, his smile welcoming. "Ms. Morrison, thank you for consulting with us. We're very serious about improving our accessibility services." He crouched down to Max's level. "And this must be Max. May I?" "Of course." Torres extended his hand slowly, letting Max sniff before gently petting his head. The dog's body language remained relaxed, no alert, no tension. Sarah filed that away. Torres likely wasn't directly involved in whatever was happening on this ship. The tour was thorough and illuminating. Torres showed her the accessible cabins with their wider doorways and modified bathrooms, the elevator systems, the designated assistance animal relief areas. But Sarah was more interested in what lay beyond the passenger spaces, the crew corridors they passed, the locked doors Torres's keycard could open, the layout of the ship's infrastructure. "We also have enhanced security throughout the vessel," Torres explained, as they walked past a bank of security monitors in a small office. "Cameras in all public areas, crew monitoring systems, direct communication with Coast Guard and maritime authorities." Sarah nodded appreciatively, while her trained eye catalogued the camera blind spots she'd already identified. The security system was good, but not perfect. There were ways to move through the ship without being tracked if you knew what you were doing. As they descended to the lower decks, Max's demeanor changed. The subtle stiffening of his posture, the focused intensity of his movements. He'd detected something. Sarah maintained her conversation with Torres while her hand found the discreet signal button on Max's harness, acknowledging his alert. They were near the cargo bay, an area Torres mentioned only in passing as restricted to crew for safety reasons. Sarah made note of the access points, the guard schedule, the type of lock system. "How do you handle valuable cargo?" she asked casually. "I imagine passengers sometimes bring expensive items." "Ah, yes. We have a secure storage area that requires special clearance to access. Very few crew members have authorization. It's necessary for both security and insurance purposes." Torres seemed pleased by her question, interpreting it as thoroughness rather than reconnaissance. The tour ended back on the promenade deck as sunset painted the ocean in shades of orange and gold. Sarah thanked Torres profusely, promising a detailed report that would highlight the ship's strengths and recommend improvements. As he walked away, Sarah stood at the railing with Max, watching the last light fade from the sky. The ship was now in open water, miles from land, moving steadily north along the coast. She was committed now, no turning back until they reached Charleston. Max leaned against her leg, a gesture of solidarity she'd come to cherish. Sarah's hand found his head, scratching behind his ears. "Day one down, boy," she murmured. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." But she already knew. Tomorrow would bring her closer to the truth, deeper into danger, further into the heart of an operation that had no patience for law enforcement interference. The ocean's pride sailed on through the darkness, carrying its secrets and its hunters toward an inevitable collision. And somewhere on this ship people were watching, wondering about the woman with the remarkable dog, asking questions that would soon demand answers Sarah wasn't prepared to give. The luxury trap had closed around them. Now came the hard part, springing it from the inside. Dawn broke across the Atlantic with deceptive serenity, sunlight glittering on waves that stretched endlessly in every direction. Sarah had been awake since 5, unable to sleep more than a few restless hours in the unfamiliar cabin. Max lay on the floor beside her bed, his breathing steady, but his ears constantly pivoting. He never truly rested on operations, always maintaining a level of vigilance that matched her own. She'd spent the pre-dawn hours reviewing the encrypted messages from the FBI and cross-referencing them with her observations from yesterday. 3 new pieces of intelligence had arrived overnight. A suspected shipment had been loaded in Savannah just hours before departure. A high-value target from the Sinaloa cartel was confirmed aboard under an alias, and intercepted communications suggested a major meeting would take place sometime in the next 48 hours. Sarah stood at the porthole, watching the ocean slide past. The ship was maintaining a steady course, roughly 20 miles offshore, close enough to see the coast as a dark line on the horizon, far enough that swimming to shore would be suicide. Her phone buzzed. A text from Torres. "Morning, Ms. Morrison. Several passengers have requested information about service dog training. Would you be willing to do an informal presentation this afternoon in the main lounge? Great publicity for your work and our accessibility program." Sarah smiled. Perfect. A public presentation would cement her cover while giving her a reason to observe the passenger population more closely. She typed back, "Would love to. What time?" 3 p.m.? I'll have our activities coordinator set it up." "Perfect. See you then." She showered quickly, dressed in practical clothes, cargo pants with useful pockets, a fitted navy polo, her running shoes. Max got his morning routine: fresh water, measured food, a quick bathroom break on the designated deck area. Other early risers smiled at them, several stopping to chat about Max's beauty and training. Breakfast in the dining room provided another opportunity for reconnaissance. Sarah chose a corner table with a clear view of the entrance and exits, methodically scanning faces as passengers filtered in. She spotted 2 men from yesterday's suspicious group, now dressed casually in resort wear but maintaining that same predatory awareness. They sat separately, didn't acknowledge each other, but Sarah noticed how their positions gave them overlapping fields of observation. Professional surveillance technique. Max, lying quietly at her feet, suddenly went rigid, his nose lifted slightly, nostrils flaring, working the air. Sarah felt the gentle tug of his alert signal through the leash. He's detected something. She continued eating her eggs, appearing relaxed while her mind raced. Max's detection training covered narcotics, explosives, and firearms. Whatever he'd picked up was somewhere in this dining room, likely being carried by one of the 100-plus passengers enjoying their breakfast. Sarah watched Max's head movements carefully. His focus kept drifting toward the buffet line, specifically toward a server in white uniform, replenishing the pastry selection. The woman was in her 30s, attractive, moving with efficient professionalism. Nothing overtly suspicious, except Max's certainty. Sarah filed the information away. She couldn't act on it now, not without compromising her cover. But tonight, when she transmitted her daily report, she'd include a description of the server and request background information. After breakfast, Sarah executed her planned reconnaissance of the ship's lower decks. She started legitimately, photographing accessibility features and making notes on her tablet, but gradually worked her way toward the restricted areas. Max walked beside her, the perfect working dog, drawing smiles and deflecting suspicion. The crew corridors were narrower, utilitarian, stripped of the luxury veneer that defined passenger spaces. Sarah moved through them with purpose, as if she had every right to be there, nodding politely to crew members they passed. Most ignored them. A few looked curious but said nothing. She was mapping the layout mentally: storage areas, mechanical rooms, crew quarters, when Max's body language shifted again. Alert, tense. His head turned toward a corridor branching left, marked with a sign reading, "Authorized personnel only." Sarah glanced around. No cameras in this section. She'd already noted that blind spot. No crew members visible. She made a decision. "Show me," she whispered to Max. They moved down the corridor, Sarah's hand resting casually near the concealed weapon at her back. The passage ended at a heavy steel door with a keycard reader. Through the small reinforced window, she could see stairs descending into darkness. Cargo hold access. Sarah pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages while actually photographing the door, lock system, and corridor layout. Max's nose worked frantically at the door's base, his entire body quivering with intensity. "What's down there, boy?" she breathed. Footsteps echoed from behind them. Sarah immediately shifted into casual mode, tapping her phone screen as if following GPS directions, looking mildly confused. A crew member rounded the corner, male, late 20s, wearing engineering coveralls. "Can I help you?" His tone was polite but firm. "This area is restricted to passengers." Sarah smiled apologetically. "I'm so sorry. I'm doing an accessibility assessment for Mr. Torres, and I think I took a wrong turn. I was trying to find the medical center." The crew member's expression softened slightly. "Medical is 2 decks up. Easy to get turned around down here." He gestured back the way they'd come. "Take that corridor, stairs at the end, then follow signs to the promenade deck." "Thank you so much." Sarah headed back, maintaining her flustered consultant persona, but her mind was racing. Max's alert had been unmistakable. Something significant was in that cargo hold. Drugs, weapons, or both. She needed access to that area, needed to document what was down there. But getting through that door would require either a stolen keycard or finding another way in. The morning passed in continued observation. Sarah attended an art auction in one of the smaller lounges, watching wealthy passengers bid thousands on mediocre paintings while she studied faces and behaviors. She walked the outer decks, timing security patrols and noting camera angles. She explored the ship's casino, which wouldn't open until evening, but allowed daytime tours, and gave her a view of the secure cash-counting room beyond. Every detail catalogued, every pattern noted, every potential asset or threat assessed. At noon, Max alerted again, this time on the sports deck where passengers were playing shuffleboard and lounging by one of the pools. Sarah traced his focus to a middle-aged man in expensive swim trunks, unremarkable except for Max's certainty. The man was carrying something, probably in the waterproof bag slung over his shoulder. Sarah memorized his face, the distinctive scar on his left forearm, his confident gait, another piece of the puzzle. Lunch was a sandwich eaten quickly in her cabin while uploading encrypted photos and notes to the FBI. Sarah included descriptions of everyone Max had alerted on, the cargo hold door details, and her growing conviction that this operation was bigger than initial intelligence suggested. The response came within minutes. "Good work. Exercise extreme caution. One of your identified subjects matches a known enforcer for the Gulf Cartel. Consider him armed and dangerous." Sarah felt ice settle in her stomach. An enforcer. Someone whose job was making problems disappear. At 3 o'clock, she stood before a group of approximately 40 passengers in the main lounge, Max sitting calmly beside her, and began her presentation about service dog training. She'd done dozens of these talks for community groups in Atlanta, so the material flowed naturally. How dogs were selected and trained, the difference between service dogs and therapy dogs, the legal rights and responsibilities of handlers. But while she spoke, she was working, scanning the audience, noting who attended, who seemed genuinely interested, versus who might be there for other reasons. The enforcer from the pool deck sat in the back row, his attention not on her, but on the other attendees, watching, evaluating. During the question and answer session, a woman in the third row asked, "What's the most dangerous situation your dog has helped you in?" Sarah smiled, keeping her answer generic. "Max has been instrumental in several challenging situations. His detection abilities have helped locate missing persons, and his presence has de-escalated potentially dangerous encounters. Service dogs saved lives every day in ways big and small. The truth, of course, was classified. The drug lab raid, where Max had detected a tripwire explosive. The manhunt, where he'd tracked a murder suspect through miles of swamp. The hostage situation, where his ability to move silently had given them the advantage they needed. After the presentation, passengers crowded around to pet Max and ask more questions. Sarah handled each interaction warmly, while her sharp eyes tracked two men who left immediately when she finished speaking, moving quickly toward the elevators with the body language of people on a mission. She wanted to follow, but couldn't without drawing attention. Instead, she waited another 20 minutes, accepting compliments and business cards, before finally excusing herself. The evening stretched ahead, with careful planning required. Sarah needed to get into that cargo hold tonight, document whatever was there, and do it without being caught. She spent 2 hours in her cabin preparing, studying ship schematics Chen had provided, planning multiple approach and escape routes, preparing her micro camera and evidence collection tools. At 9 o'clock, she dressed in dark clothes and soft-soled shoes. Max wore a matte black harness, all reflective elements removed. They looked like shadows, ready to slip through darkness. The ship's nightlife was in full swing, the casino packed, the bars busy, entertainment venues hosting shows and music. Perfect cover. Passengers were distracted, crew focused on service, security stretched thin monitoring multiple areas. Sarah and Max moved through the ship like ghosts, using crew corridors and emergency stairwells, avoiding cameras, timing their movements to slip past patrols. It took 30 minutes to reach the restricted corridor from this morning. Empty, silent. The cargo hold door waited. Sarah pulled out the keycard programmer Chen had disguised as a credit card reader. It was FBI tech, designed to bypass basic security systems. She held it against the reader, watching the small screen as code cycled through possibilities. 30 seconds. 45. Click. The lock disengaged. Sarah pulled the door open just wide enough for her and Max to slip through, then closed it behind them. Darkness enveloped them, except for the small, tactical flashlight she clicked on. The stairs descended 2 levels, ending at another door, this one unlocked. Beyond lay the cargo hold, a vast space filled with containers, crates, and shipping pallets secured with nets and straps. The ship's movement was more pronounced down here, a gentle rocking that required adjusted balance. Max's alert was immediate and strong. Whatever he detected was close. They moved deeper into the hold, Sarah photographing everything, shipping labels, container numbers, any identifying marks. Most of it appeared legitimate. Passenger luggage, supplies, equipment. But Max led her toward the back corner, where a cluster of unmarked containers sat separate from the rest. Sarah examined the nearest one. Heavy-duty construction, commercial locks, no external identification. She photographed it from every angle, then noticed something. Scratches around the lock mechanism indicating recent opening. A sound froze her mid-motion. Voices coming from the stairs. "Told you it's fine. Nobody comes down here at night. The boss wants it checked daily. You know the rules." 2 men, descending, 30 seconds away. Sarah's mind raced through options. No time to reach the stairs. No alternate exits visible. She clicked off her flashlight, grabbed Max's harness, and moved quickly behind a stack of large crates. The space was tight, barely enough room for both of them, offering concealment, but no escape if they were discovered. The men entered the cargo hold, flashlights sweeping the space. Sarah pressed against the crate, hand on Max's back, sending the signal for absolute silence. The dog became motionless, not even his breathing audible. "See? Nothing," the first voice said. "You're paranoid. After what happened in Miami, you should be paranoid too." The second voice was older, harder. "We can't afford any mistakes on this run. Too much at stake." They moved toward the unmarked containers. Sarah heard keys rattling, a lock opening. She risked a glance around the crate's edge. 2 crew members, both matches for the suspected operatives from the FBI brief. One was opening the nearest container while the other kept watch. From her angle, Sarah couldn't see what was inside, but she could see their body language, tense, alert, handling something valuable. "Package is secure," the first man said. "Temperature stable, seals intact. Good. The meat is set for tomorrow night after the midnight buffet closes. Buyers will inspect the merchandise then. Tomorrow night. A meeting. Buyers." Sarah's heart pounded. This was it, the intelligence breakthrough they needed. If she could observe that meeting, identify the buyers, document the transaction. The men closed and locked the container, then swept their flashlights around the hold one more time. The beam passed within inches of Sarah's hiding spot. She held her breath, feeling Max's complete stillness beside her. "Let's go. I need a drink." "You always need a drink." Their footsteps receded. The door opened and closed. Silence returned. Sarah waited a full 5 minutes before moving, ensuring they wouldn't come back. Then she emerged from hiding, her legs cramping from the awkward position, and approached the containers they'd checked. She photographed everything again, this time with measurements and detailed shots of the lock mechanism. Whatever was inside these containers was worth serious protection and serious money. Max whined softly, his signal for "we need to leave." Sarah agreed. They'd been here too long, risked too much already. Time to extract before their luck ran out. The return journey through the ship was tense, every sound making Sarah's hand drift toward her weapon, every corner potentially hiding discovery. But they made it back to cabin B-47 without incident. Sarah locked the door, drew the curtains, and immediately began uploading her findings via the encrypted satellite link. Photos, voice notes detailing what she'd overheard, her analysis of what it all meant. The message ended with, "Meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, approximately 0:30 hours. Recommend standing by for actionable intelligence. Will attempt to observe and document." She collapsed on the bed, adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by exhaustion. Max jumped up beside her, his solid presence a comfort. "We're getting close, boy," she whispered, scratching his ears. "One more day. We just need to stay undetected one more day." But as Sarah drifted towards sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that her careful cover was developing cracks, that tomorrow would bring challenges she hadn't anticipated. The Ocean's Pride sailed on through the night, its secrets now less hidden, its hunters closer to their prey. And somewhere on this ship, people were making plans that would soon collide with Sarah Collins and her unwavering partner. The shadows beneath the deck held answers. Tomorrow night, she would find them. The third day aboard the Ocean's Pride began with an announcement that changed everything. Sarah woke to the captain's voice over the ship's intercom system, his tone professionally calm, but carrying an undercurrent of concern. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Rodriguez. I want to inform you that we're tracking a weather system developing off the coast. A tropical storm has formed unexpectedly and is currently moving in our direction. This is not unusual for this time of year, and the Ocean's Pride is fully equipped to handle rough seas. However, we'll be adjusting our course and speed as a precautionary measure. All outdoor activities will be suspended by this evening, and we ask that you follow crew instructions regarding safety protocols. Thank you for your cooperation." Sarah stood at her porthole, watching the ocean. The water had already changed. Deeper swells, whitecaps forming, the sky taking on a grey, oppressive quality. A storm. The timing couldn't be worse, or perhaps it couldn't be better. Rough weather would provide cover for tonight's surveillance operation, but it would also make everything more dangerous. Max sat beside her, his body tense. Dogs could sense atmospheric changes before humans, and she could tell he felt the approaching storm in ways she couldn't. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring him or herself. Her encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Agent Chen. "Storm complicates extraction if needed. Coast Guard may be unable to respond quickly in heavy weather. Advise aborting surveillance operation." Sarah stared at the message. Abort, play it safe, wait for Charleston. But they were running out of time. The meeting was tonight. The evidence she could gather might be the difference between dismantling this entire network or watching key players slip away. She'd spent 6 years building trust with Max, honing their partnership, preparing for exactly this kind of high-stakes operation. She typed back, "Understood. Proceeding as planned. Will maintain communication protocols." The response was immediate. "Your call, Collins. Be careful." The morning passed in mounting tension. The ship's crew began securing outdoor furniture, closing deck access, preparing for heavy weather. Passengers grew restless, confined to interior spaces, the vacation atmosphere souring with each weather update. Sarah used the chaos to her advantage, moving through the ship one final time, confirming her routes for tonight, noting which crew members were where. At lunch, she spotted the enforcer again, the Gulf cartel operative Chen had identified. He was speaking with 2 other men near the casino entrance, their conversation intense, private. Sarah memorized their faces, wished desperately she could get close enough to hear what they were discussing. One of the men glanced her direction. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before Sarah looked away, turning her attention to Max as if correcting his position. But that brief moment sent ice through her veins. The man's expression had shifted, recognition, calculation, suspicion. He knows, or suspects. Either way, her window was closing faster than anticipated. Sarah spent the afternoon in her cabin, obsessively reviewing tonight's plan, checking her equipment, running through contingencies. The storm was getting worse. She could hear wind beginning to howl against the ship's hull, feel the increased motion as waves grew larger. The captain made another announcement around 4 o'clock, implementing full storm protocols and requesting all passengers remain in their cabins after 10 p.m. Perfect. The meeting she'd overheard was scheduled for after midnight, which meant the cargo hold would be empty of legitimate crew, and anyone she encountered would be part of the operation. At 8 o'clock, Sarah ate dinner from room service, forcing herself to consume calories she'd need later. Max got his evening meal, fresh water, a bathroom break. She changed into dark tactical clothing, black cargo pants, a fitted long-sleeve shirt, her softest shoes. The concealed weapon went into its holster at her back, extra ammunition in her pocket, the micro camera secured in a waterproof case. She attached Max's tactical harness, checking every strap and buckle. His dark eyes watched her with complete understanding. They'd done dangerous work before, but never quite like this. Isolated on a ship in a storm, surrounded by criminals, with backup hours away even in good weather. "Ready?" she asked softly. Max's tail gave a single wag. "Ready." At 11:30, they left the cabin. The ship was eerily quiet, most passengers following the captain's directive to stay secured. The crew they encountered were focused on storm duties, monitoring systems, securing equipment, preparing for the worst of the weather still hours away. Sarah moved through shadows and crew corridors, her path now familiar from days of reconnaissance. The ship's motion was pronounced, requiring careful balance. Wind screamed outside, and even through the hull, she could hear waves crashing against steel. They reached the cargo hold access without incident. Sarah's stolen keycard, lifted from a distracted crew member yesterday and carefully cloned, worked perfectly. The door opened, and they descended into darkness. The cargo hold was transformed by the storm. Everything groaned and creaked, the ship's movement amplified here in the lowest levels. Containers strained against their restraints. Shadows shifted with each roll of the deck. The air smelled of oil and salt, and something else. Fear, maybe, or just Sarah's imagination. She found a hiding position behind maintenance equipment, with a clear view of the unmarked containers. Max settled beside her, his breathing steady, his attention absolute. Now they waited. Midnight passed, 12:15, 12:30. Then, voices, footsteps on the stairs, flashlight beams cutting through darkness. 5 men entered the cargo hold. Sarah recognized 3 of them from her surveillance, including the enforcer and the 2 men she'd spotted talking near the casino. The other two were new, dressed in expensive casual clothes that marked them as passengers, not crew, the buyers. Sarah activated her micro-camera, the lens barely larger than a button, and began recording. Every word, every face, every detail that could be used as evidence. "You're late," the enforcer said, his voice carrying clearly in the echoing space. "Your storm made navigation difficult," one of the buyers replied, in accented English. Russian, Sarah thought. "Now show us the merchandise. We don't have all night." The crew members unlocked the unmarked containers. Sarah's position didn't allow her to see inside, but she could see the buyers' reactions. Satisfied nods, careful inspection, the body language of people examining valuable goods. "Quality is acceptable," the Russian said. "The quantity matches our agreement. 50 kilos of pure product, plus the weapons package you requested. M4 variants, Glock handguns, ammunition. Everything your organization needs for the Eastern European expansion." Sarah's pulse hammered. 50 kilos. This wasn't just a drug deal. This was a major arms transaction too. The evidence she was gathering would bring down not just this network, but potentially expose international trafficking routes. "Payment arrangements?" the enforcer asked. "Wire transfer completes upon delivery in Charleston. Our people will handle distribution from there." "What about the cop?" Sarah's blood froze. "What cop?" The Russian's voice sharpened with suspicion. "We think there might be law enforcement aboard. A woman with a dog. She's been asking questions, going places she shouldn't be." "You think, or you know?" The buyer's tone turned dangerous. "We're investigating. If she's a problem, we'll handle it before Charleston." The Russian stepped closer to the enforcer. "If you've compromised this operation—" "We haven't. I said we're handling it." Sarah's mind raced. They suspected her, but weren't certain. Yet. But after this meeting, they'd be looking harder, and Max's detection abilities and her own careful surveillance had left traces a professional security team would eventually recognize. She needed to finish recording this transaction and get out. Now. But as she shifted position slightly, her foot caught on a loose bolt on the floor. The small metallic sound seemed deafening in the tense silence. Everyone froze. "What was that?" one of the crew members hissed. Flashlight beams swept the cargo hold. Sarah pressed flat against the equipment, hand on Max's back, signaling absolute stillness. The beams passed inches from their position. "Probably just the storm," someone said. "This whole ship is groaning." "Check it anyway." Footsteps approached. Sarah's hand moved to her weapon. If discovered, she'd have to fight 5 armed men in a confined space with limited backup options. The tactical situation was nightmare fuel. Max's muscles coiled under her hand. He was ready to attack if she gave the signal, trained to protect her without hesitation. The footsteps came closer. 10 feet, 5. A massive wave struck the ship, the strongest yet. The Ocean's Pride rolled violently to port, throwing everyone off balance. Containers groaned against their restraints. Someone shouted. A flashlight clattered to the floor. Sarah seized the moment. While everyone was distracted by the ship's motion and their own efforts to stay upright, she moved quickly and silently, Max right with her, toward an alternative exit she'd identified during her reconnaissance. A maintenance access leading to a different corridor system. Behind her, she heard the enforcer. "Forget it! Let's finish this and get out of here. I hate being down here in this storm." They'd missed her. Barely. Sarah and Max reached the maintenance door, slipped through, and closed it silently behind them. Her heart hammered against her ribs. That had been too close. But she had the recording. The faces, the voices, the incriminating details. Evidence that would hold up in court. They navigated back through the ship's lower levels, Sarah's tactical awareness at maximum. The storm was worsening. She could feel it in every violent roll of the deck, hear it in the screaming wind, sense it in the crew's increasingly urgent communications over walkie-talkies. They were almost to the crew stairwell that would lead back to passenger areas when 3 men rounded the corner ahead of them. The enforcer. The 2 crew members from the meeting. Sarah's hand dropped to her weapon, but before she could draw, the enforcer's eyes locked onto hers. Recognition flared. His hand moved to his waistband. "That's her!" he snarled. "The cop with the dog!" Time seemed to fracture. Sarah's training took over. Muscle memory and split-second decision-making honed by thousands of hours of preparation. She drew her weapon as the enforcer drew his. Max launched forward on her command, a 60-pound missile of teeth and trained aggression, hitting the nearest crew member before he could pull his gun. The man went down screaming. Sarah fired twice at the enforcer, sent a mass, exactly as trained. He staggered but didn't fall, body armor absorbing the rounds. He returned fire. The bullet passed so close to Sarah's head she felt the displacement of air. The corridor erupted in chaos. The second crew member had his weapon out. Max was engaged with the first. The enforcer was advancing for a kill shot, and Sarah had maybe 2 seconds to survive. She dropped low, fired at the second crew member's legs, areas not covered by armor. He went down. Then she rolled, came up, and put a round through the enforcer's knee. He collapsed with a roar of pain and rage. "Max, come!" The dog disengaged immediately, returning to Sarah's side, his muzzle bloody from the crew member's arm. Sarah ran. Behind her, she heard the enforcer screaming into a radio. "All units, we have a federal agent aboard. Deck 3, crew corridor, lock down the ship." The alarm went out. Sarah's cover was completely blown. Every criminal on this ship now knew law enforcement was aboard, and they'd do anything to eliminate the threat before the ship reached Charleston. She and Max burst through a door onto an outer deck. The storm hit them like a physical blow, wind that tried to rip her off her feet, rain lashing horizontal, waves towering in the darkness. The deck was slick, treacherous, the ship heaving violently. Sarah fought her way aft, looking for somewhere to hide, to regroup, to call for extraction. But the encrypted satellite uplink was in her cabin, and going back there was suicide. It would be the first place they'd look. She reached the upper deck railing, looked down at the churning ocean 30 feet below, black and merciless under racing storm clouds. Behind her, the door crashed open. 6 men spilled out, weapons drawn, murder in their eyes. The enforcer limped at the front, his face twisted with pain and fury. "Nowhere to run, cop!" he shouted over the wind. "You're dead!" Sarah's back was literally against the railing. Max pressed against her legs, growling, ready to fight to the death if necessary. She calculated odds. 6 armed men, no cover, 1 weapon with maybe 8 rounds left, a storm that made accuracy nearly impossible, and Max, brave, loyal Max, who would die protecting her if it came to that. The enforcer raised his weapon. The others followed suit. Sarah saw their fingers tightening on triggers. She made her choice. "I love you, boy," she said to Max, and pushed herself backward over the railing. For a fractured instant, she saw the shock on their faces. They'd expected her to fight, to beg, anything but this. Then gravity took her, and she was falling through rain and darkness toward the violent ocean below. Max's desperate howl was the last thing she heard before she hit the water and the Atlantic swallowed her whole. The impact knocked every molecule of air from Sarah's lungs. The ocean struck like concrete, the force of hitting water at 30 feet, stunning her body, sending shockwaves through bone and muscle. Cold, impossibly cold, enveloped her instantly, the Atlantic in October hovering just above 50 degrees. She plunged deep, the momentum carrying her down into darkness. Salt water invaded her nose, her mouth burning. Her tactical clothing became dead weight, dragging her deeper. Disorientation complete. She couldn't tell which way was up, couldn't see anything in the black water, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Training. Fall back on training. Sarah forced her panicking mind to function. She stopped thrashing, felt for the pull of her clothing, followed it down, meaning up was the opposite direction. She kicked, fought toward where the surface should be, her lungs screaming for air. Her head broke through. She gasped, sucking in blessed oxygen mixed with rain and spray. A wave immediately crashed over her, pushing her under again. She fought back up, gasping, disoriented. The ocean's pride was already frighteningly far away, its lights receding into the storm. The ship hadn't stopped, wouldn't stop. They'd write her off as swept overboard in the storm if they reported it at all. A tragic accident. Case closed. Another wave lifted her high, then dropped her into a trough. In that brief, elevated moment, Sarah saw something that made her heart nearly stop. A dark shape launching from the ship's railing. Max! No! The scream ripped from her throat. Max! No! But he was already airborne, a black silhouette against the ship's lights, arcing through rain and darkness. He hit the water 60 feet from where she'd gone in, disappeared beneath the surface. Sarah's terror crystallized into pure focus. She couldn't save herself and lose Max. She wouldn't. She kicked off her shoes. They were dragging her down. Her cargo pants came off next, a desperate struggle in the heaving water, but necessary. The weight would kill her. Her shirt she kept, modest insulation against hypothermia that would set in within minutes. Max! She screamed his name into the storm. Max! A bark, faint but unmistakable. There, 20 yards away, his head above water, swimming toward her with powerful strokes. Belgian Malinois were strong swimmers, bred for exactly this kind of waterwork, but even Max would struggle in storm conditions. Sarah swam toward him, fighting waves that seemed determined to keep them apart. Every stroke was agony, her body already numbing from cold, her muscles burning from exertion and the trauma of impact. They reached each other. Max's dark eyes locked onto hers, and even in this nightmare, Sarah saw absolute trust. He jumped after her without hesitation, following his partner into the abyss, because that's what partners did. Good boy, she gasped, her hand finding his harness. Stay with me. We're getting through this. But getting through meant survival. And survival meant beating odds that grew worse by the second. They were miles from shore, in storm-tossed Atlantic water at night, with hypothermia's clock already ticking. Coast Guard rescue would be impossible in these conditions. No helicopter could fly in this weather. No boat could safely navigate these seas. They were on their own. Sarah forced herself to think tactically. First priority, stay afloat. Second, preserve body heat as long as possible. Third, survive until conditions improved enough for rescue. She shifted her grip on Max's harness, positioning herself so they could help each other stay above water. In training exercises, she'd learned that a dog swimming could actually help support a person if properly positioned. Max seemed to understand instinctively, adjusting his movements to work with hers rather than against her. We're a team, she told him, her voice barely audible over the wind. We survived together. The next hour was an eternity of suffering. Waves lifted them high, dropped them into valleys of churning water. Rain lashed their faces. Wind screamed. Sarah's body temperature dropped steadily. She could feel it in the sluggishness of her thoughts, the increasing difficulty of coordinating her movements. Max stayed close, his body heat a small comfort pressed against her. She kept one hand on his harness, the other treading water when she had the strength, floating when she didn't. They rose and fell with the swells, two small living things in an ocean that didn't care whether they lived or died. Sarah's tactical watch had survived, waterproof to 100 feet. The luminous display showed 1:47 a.m. She'd been in the water maybe 40 minutes. Survival time in 50-degree water ranged from 1 to 3 hours, depending on body type, physical condition, and will to live. She was fit, trained, motivated, but she was also losing the battle against cold. Her fingers were numb, her legs barely responded to commands. Shivering had progressed from violent to absent, a bad sign, meaning her core temperature had dropped dangerously low. Stay awake, she told herself, told Max. Stay awake, stay aware. But consciousness was becoming negotiable. Her mind drifted, pulled toward darkness that promised warmth and rest. She caught herself starting to let go of Max's harness, her frozen fingers loosening. Max barked sharply, right in her face. The sound jolted her back to awareness. His nose pushed against her cheek, insistent, demanding she focus. "I'm here," she slurred, "still here." How much longer? How much more could they endure? A wave larger than the others lifted them, and at its crest, Sarah saw something. A light, small, distant but steady. Not the ocean's pride's receding glow, but something else. Fixed, unmoving, a navigation buoy. Hope exploded through her fading consciousness. Buoys meant something to hold on to rest against, to preserve energy. If she could reach it, if they could hold on until dawn when rescue might be possible. "There!" she gasped to Max, pointing with a hand that barely obeyed. "We swim. Together." It looked impossibly far, maybe 200 yards, though distance was hard to judge in darkness and heaving seas. In normal conditions, an easy swim. In storm conditions, while hypothermic, possibly impossible. Sarah kicked, pulled with her free arm, the other still gripping Max's harness. The dog swam beside her, his stroke steady, mechanical, driven by training and loyalty that transcended canine instinct. They were a single unit moving through chaos toward a desperate chance at survival. The swim became timeless. Stroke, kick, breathe, survive, over and over. Sarah's vision narrowed to tunnel focus. Just the next movement, just the next breath. Max's presence kept her anchored to reality when her mind wanted to drift away. The buoy grew incrementally closer. 50 yards. 40. 30. Sarah's muscles screamed, then went numb, then simply stopped responding efficiently. She was operating on pure will now, biological systems shutting down, her brainstem driving her body forward through some primal survival mechanism. 20 yards. A wave crashed over them, pushing them under. Sarah held her breath, held onto Max, waited for the churning to stop. They surfaced together, both gasping. 10 yards. Max reached it first. His paws scraped against the metal float, finding purchase. Sarah dragged herself the final distance, her hands, barely functional, grasping the cold metal. The buoy was a standard navigation marker, about 4 feet across, with a maintenance ladder and platform just above waterline. She pulled herself up with the last reserves of strength, her body barely obeying. Max scrambled up beside her, shaking water from his coat, his breathing labored but steady. They collapsed on the platform, a space maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, barely large enough for both of them. But it was out of the water. It was stable. It was survival. Sarah wrapped her arms around Max, sharing what little body heat they had left. The storm raged around them, but they were together, alive, holding on. Her watch showed 2:33 a.m. She'd been in the water over an hour. Her core temperature was dangerously low, her body shaking uncontrollably now that she was out of the water. The shivering reflex returning as her brain fought to generate heat. "We made it," she whispered into Max's wet fur. "We're alive, but for how long?" Dawn was hours away. Rescue couldn't come in these conditions, and hypothermia's progression was relentless. Confusion would come next, then unconsciousness, then death. Sarah fumbled with her tactical vest, still somehow strapped to her body. The emergency beacon. Did it survive? Her numb fingers found it, pressed the activation stud. A small LED blinked red, signal transmitting. But to who? In this weather, would anyone even detect it? She pulled Max closer, the dog's solid warmth the only thing keeping her conscious. Her mind began to wander again, drifting through memories. Her first day with Max 6 years ago, when he was just the intense puppy with remarkable focus. Their first successful operation together, the countless training sessions, the bond they'd built through shared experience and mutual trust. "Best partner I ever had," she mumbled, her words slurring. "Best dog, best friend." Max licked her face, his tongue rough and warm, another anchor to life. The storm showed no signs of abating. Waves crashed against the buoy, spray soaking them continuously. The platform rocked and swayed. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating a seascape of chaos. Endless waves, driven rain, a sky that pressed down like a physical weight. Sarah's watch showed 3:15 a.m., then 3:47 a.m. Then she stopped checking, conserving even that small movement of energy. She focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on holding Max, on surviving one more minute, then another, then another. The night stretched toward eternity, and then sound. Different from wind and waves, mechanical, growing louder, a helicopter. Sarah's head jerked up, her sluggish mind struggling to process. Through the rain and darkness she saw lights, a searchlight beam sweeping the water, moving in a grid pattern. The distinctive thump of rotor blades cutting through storm. Coast Guard. It had to be. Her emergency beacon must have transmitted, but they weren't looking in the right place. The searchlight was scanning an area 100 yards east, moving away from the buoy. Sarah tried to stand, nearly fell. Her legs wouldn't support her weight. She waved her arms, but her movements were feeble, invisible in the darkness and storm. "Here!" she screamed, but her voice was a croak, inaudible over the helicopter's engines and wind. The searchlight continued sweeping away. They hadn't seen her. They were going to miss her. Max suddenly stood, his legs shaking but stable. He threw back his head and howled, a sound that cut through the night, primal and unmistakable. Again and again, Max howled, calling to the rescuers with everything he had left. The searchlight paused, swung back. The helicopter banked, turning. The beam found them. Sarah had never seen a more beautiful sight than that spotlight illuminating the buoy, the helicopter positioning overhead, the rescue swimmer being lowered on a cable. The swimmer reached the platform, secured a rescue sling around Sarah, then carefully secured Max in a specialized harness. The winch pulled them up, slowly, steadily, lifting them from the ocean that had tried so hard to claim them. Strong hands pulled Sarah into the helicopter. Thermal blankets wrapped around her immediately. Someone was checking her vital signs, another crew member tending to Max. "Officer Sarah Collins," a voice asked. "Atlanta PD K9 unit." She managed a weak nod. "Your emergency beacon saved your life. FBI alerted us the moment it activated. We've been searching for 2 hours. 2 hours. They'd been on that buoy for 2 hours. She'd lost track of time. "The ship," she tried to say, "the Ocean's Pride, is being escorted to port by Coast Guard cutters. FBI boarding team is standing by. We got your transmitted evidence. Every criminal on that ship is going down." Sarah closed her eyes, let the warmth of the blankets seep in, felt Max pressed against her side. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd survived and completed the mission. The helicopter banked toward shore, toward safety, toward the end of the nightmare. But even as consciousness finally slipped away, Sarah's hand remained locked in Max's harness, partners to the end. Sarah woke to sterile white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of medical monitors. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then sensation returned, the warmth of blankets, the ache in every muscle, the IV line in her arm delivering fluids and medications. Hospital. She was in a hospital. Memory flooded back. The ship, the confrontation, the fall, the endless struggle in freezing water, Max jumping after her, the buoy, the rescue. Max. Sarah tried to sit up, her body protesting violently. A hand gently pressed her shoulder back down. "Easy, Officer Collins. You're safe." A nurse in blue scrubs smiled at her with professional warmth. "You're at Memorial University Medical Center in Savannah. You were brought in 4 hours ago with severe hypothermia and exhaustion. Your core temperature was dangerously low, but you're stable now." "Max," Sarah croaked, her throat raw. "My dog. Where's Max?" "The Belgian Malinois? He's fine." The veterinary team checked him thoroughly. Some minor cuts, exhaustion, but nothing serious. Dogs are remarkably resilient. He's in the recovery area, and I understand there's quite a line of people wanting to meet him. The nurse adjusted Sarah's IV. "He saved your life, you know. The rescue swimmer said if that dog hadn't howled when he did, they would have missed you in the storm." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Max had saved her again, as he'd done so many times before. But this time he'd risked everything. Jumped into the Atlantic in a storm, swam through conditions that could have killed him, held on through the nightmare just to stay with his partner. The door opened, and Agent Marcus Chen entered, his expression a mixture of relief and something else, respect maybe. He carried a tablet and a thick folder. "Collins, hell of a night." He pulled a chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fell off a ship and spent 2 hours in the Atlantic." Sarah managed a weak smile. "But alive. Mission status." Chen's face lit up with satisfaction. "Complete success. The Coast Guard intercepted the Ocean's Pride at dawn. FBI boarding team arrested 23 individuals, including the enforcer you shot and all the buyers from the meeting. Your recorded evidence is admissible and devastating. We've also seized 50 kilograms of pure cocaine, 37 firearms, and documentation linking this operation to cartels in Colombia, Mexico, and Eastern Europe." He opened the tablet, showing her photos. Suspects in handcuffs, the cargo containers being opened, evidence bags filled with weapons and drugs. "This is the biggest maritime trafficking bust in a decade, and it happened because you and Max refused to give up, even when they literally threw you overboard." Sarah studied the photos, feeling grim satisfaction. Justice. These people would face consequences for their crimes, and the network they'd built was dismantled. "The enforcer, the one you shot, he's talking," Chen continued, "trying to cut a deal. He's confirmed there are additional cells operating on other cruise lines. Your investigation has opened up 5 new cases we didn't even know existed." "What about casualties on the ship?" Sarah asked. "The 2 crew members Max engaged are in custody with minor injuries. No one else was hurt during the FBI takedown. They surrendered when they realized the game was over. Your falling overboard actually worked in our favor. They got complacent, thought the threat was eliminated, stopped being as careful, made them easier to catch." Chen closed the tablet and leaned back. "The director wants to commend both you and Max officially. You're looking at a Medal of Valor, Collins. And Max is being nominated for the K9 Officer of the Year." Sarah shook her head slightly. "We were just doing our job." "Your job doesn't include surviving impossible odds in the Atlantic Ocean during a storm." Chen's voice carried intensity. "What you did out there, most people would have died. The hypothermia alone should have killed you. But you fought, you survived, you got that evidence transmitted before everything went to hell. That's not just doing your job. That's heroism." The door opened again, and this time Sarah's heart lifted. A veterinary technician entered, leading Max on a leash. The dog looked clean, dry, wearing a bandage on one paw, but otherwise alert and healthy. The moment Max saw Sarah, his entire body language transformed. His tail began wagging with such force his whole back end moved. He pulled toward the bed, whining with joy and relief. "Max!" Sarah's voice broke. "Come here, boy." The technician released the leash, and Max jumped onto the hospital bed with surprising gentleness, pressing against Sarah's side, licking her face, his entire being radiating happiness. Sarah wrapped her arms around him, buried her face in his fur, and finally let herself cry, tears of relief, gratitude, love, and the overwhelming bond that had carried them through the impossible. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've always got you." Chen stood quietly, giving them their moment, his own eyes suspiciously bright. After a few minutes, he cleared his throat gently. "Collins, I need to tell you something else. When we reviewed your cabin after the arrest, we found surveillance equipment, a camera hidden in the light fixture, a microphone in the smoke detector. They'd been watching you since day one. They knew you were law enforcement almost from the moment you boarded." Sarah's arms tightened around Max. "Then why wait to move against me? They were trying to figure out how much you knew, who else might be involved, whether you were working alone. When you infiltrated the cargo hold meeting, they made their decision. But here's the thing, your evidence transmission had already completed before they confronted you. Even if they'd killed you, the case would have proceeded. Your mission was successful before that enforcer ever cornered you on the deck." Sarah processed that information. She'd been under surveillance the entire time, her every move analyzed by criminals who specialized in eliminating threats. The danger had been even worse than she'd realized. "Max alerted several times during the operation," she said quietly. "He knew something was wrong. He always knows." Chen nodded. "Belgian Malinois have instincts we barely understand. The K9 handlers I've worked with all say the same thing. Trust the dog. The dog knows things we can't sense. Over the next 3 days, Sarah recovered in the hospital while the full scope of the investigation unfolded. Media coverage was intense. Hero cop and dog survive ocean ordeal dominated headlines. The story captured public imagination, the undercover operation, the dramatic confrontation, the fall into the Atlantic, the desperate survival, the helicopter rescue. Visitors came steadily. Her captain from Atlanta PD arrived with the entire K9 unit, bringing cards and gifts and shared stories. FBI officials briefed her on the expanding investigation her work had triggered. Local police officers stopped by to meet the legendary duo who'd survived the impossible. But the most meaningful visitor came on the 3rd day, an older woman in her 60s, dressed simply, her face weathered by sun and time. "Officer Collins, I'm Margaret Chen, Marcus's mother. I wanted to thank you personally." The woman's eyes were warm. "My son tells me you refused to abort the mission, even when given the option. That you put everything on the line to stop dangerous people. That takes courage most people don't have." "I was just doing your job, I know. That's what Marcus said you'd say." Margaret smiled. "But jobs don't make people jump into storm-tossed Atlantic water. Character does. Courage does. And that magnificent dog of yours, jumping after you without hesitation, that's the kind of loyalty we should all aspire to." She placed a small package on Sarah's bedside table. "I'm a quilter. I made this for you and Max. Something to remember what you survived and what you mean to each other." After Margaret left, Sarah opened the package. Inside was a quilted wall hanging, expertly crafted, showing a stylized image of a woman and dog silhouetted against an ocean sunset. Embroidered words read, "Unbreakable Bond." Sarah ran her fingers over the careful stitching, feeling the love sewn into every thread. Max, lying beside her bed, lifted his head and placed it on her lap, his dark eyes watching her with that expression of complete understanding. "Yeah, boy," she whispered, "unbreakable." On the 4th day, doctors cleared Sarah for discharge. Agent Chen arrived to drive her and Max back to Atlanta, where a formal ceremony awaited. But first, he took them to the Coast Guard station. The helicopter crew that had rescued them stood in formation. Pilot, co-pilot, rescue swimmer, flight mechanic. When Sarah and Max approached, they saluted. "It's an honor, Officer Collins," the rescue swimmer said. "We've executed hundreds of rescues, but we've never seen anything like what you two endured. The conditions that night, no one should have survived, but you did, through sheer will and partnership." The pilot stepped forward. "We wanted to give you this." He handed her a framed photo, an aerial shot of the navigation buoy taken at dawn after the rescue. In the image, you could barely see 2 small shapes huddled on the platform, holding onto each other and life itself. "That's courage," the pilot said simply. "That's never giving up." The drive back to Atlanta took 4 hours. Sarah dozed periodically, Max sleeping soundly in the back seat, both still recovering from their ordeal. Chen filled her in on additional details, the trials that would follow, the testimony she'd need to provide, the ongoing investigation into other trafficking networks. "You know," Chen said as they approached Atlanta's skyline, "the FBI is always looking for experienced officers with your skill set. If you ever consider a change from local PD, we'd be lucky to have you. And Max, of course." Sarah looked back at the sleeping dog, her partner, her friend, the being who'd literally followed her into the abyss because their bond was stronger than fear or common sense. "I appreciate that," she said, "but Max and I have work to do in Atlanta. People to protect, cases to solve, together." Chen nodded, understanding. "The offer stands, any time." The ceremony at Atlanta Police Department headquarters was attended by hundreds, officers, city officials, FBI representatives, community members, and media. Sarah wore her dress uniform, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its importance. Max sat beside her in his formal K9 vest, looking every inch the hero he was. The police chief presented Sarah with the Medal of Valor, the department's highest honor. FBI director presented Max with a custom-made medal designating him K9 Officer of the Year. Cameras flashed, people applauded. Speeches were made about courage and dedication and the special bond between handlers and their canine partners. But the moment that mattered most to Sarah came after the ceremony, when a little girl, maybe 7 years old, approached shyly with her parents. "Officer Sarah, can I pet Max?" Sarah smiled. "Of course. Max loves meeting new friends." The girl knelt beside Max, gently stroking his head while he sat perfectly still, his tail wagging slowly. "My daddy says Max is a hero. He says Max jumped in the ocean to save you." "That's right. Max is the bravest dog I know." The girl looked up at Sarah with serious eyes. "When I grow up, I want to be a police officer with a dog partner, just like you." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. This inspiring the next generation, showing them what courage and partnership looked like. This was why the ceremony mattered, why sharing their story mattered. "Then work hard, be kind, and always stand up for what's right," Sarah told her. "And maybe someday you'll have a partner as amazing as Max." That evening, Sarah and Max returned to their apartment, a small one-bedroom in a quiet Atlanta neighborhood that had been home for 6 years. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, yet everything felt different. She'd faced death and survived. She'd been tested in ways she'd never imagined, and she'd discovered that the bond she shared with Max was literally unbreakable, forged in fire and ice, and refusing to yield even when all logic said it should. She sat on her couch, Max beside her, his head on her lap. Outside, the city hummed with normal life. Traffic, voices, music, the everyday sounds of people living their lives in safety they often took for granted. Safety that officers like Sarah worked to maintain. Justice that she and Max helped deliver. Her phone buzzed with a text from Chen. "First trial date set for 8 weeks from now. Your testimony will be crucial. Are you ready?" Sarah looked at Max, saw the intelligence and loyalty in his eyes, felt the solid weight of him against her side. She typed back, "We're ready, always." Because that was the truth. Whatever came next, trials, new cases, new dangers, they would face it together. That was the promise she'd made 6 years ago, when an intense young Malinois puppy had looked at her with absolute trust and chosen her as his partner. That was the promise she'd kept when she fell into the Atlantic, when Max jumped after her, when they'd fought through the impossible and survived. Sarah scratched behind Max's ears, and he sighed with contentment, his eyes drifting closed. "Rest, boy," she whispered. "You've earned it. We both have." Outside, the sun set over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the city, crimes were being committed, people needed help, justice waited to be served. Tomorrow, Sarah and Max would return to work. Patrols, training, cases, the daily grind of law enforcement. But tonight, they simply existed together in perfect understanding. Two beings whose bond had been tested by the worst the world could throw at them, and had emerged not just intact but stronger. The ocean's pride sailed no more, its criminal network dismantled, its passengers freed from danger they'd never known existed. 23 criminals faced justice. Countless lives were saved from drugs and weapons that would never reach their destinations, all because a police officer and her dog refused to give up, refused to break, refused to let the ocean claim them. Sarah closed her eyes, her hand resting on Max's head, and smiled. They'd pushed her off the ship, thinking that would end the threat. They'd been wrong. She hadn't needed a lifeboat. She'd had something better. She'd had Max, and together they were unbreakable. The end